Hey everyone, and welcome to my walkthrough for the Dragonsong's Reprise Ultimate, the Complete Edition. In this one I'm going to walk you through the entire fight from start to finish. Now, this is going to be one hell of a long video most likely, so I'll be providing timestamps in the video as well as in the description, so that you can skip to whatever phase that you want information about, or also specific mechanics within certain phases, like if there's like multiple big mechanics or something. I'll put timestamps for that as well. But let's start off with phase 1. Now, phase 1 is a door boss fight, meaning that as soon as you clear this, you can run into the wall, reset, and then you can start at phase 2. So for this, we're going to be using different markers. You can just copy them as you see them right here. They're going to be used for two different mechanics. For one, they are going to be used for actual positioning. For the other, we're color coding our markers so that we can use those with corresponding mechanics, so that we can just match colors and have it be a bit easier like that. Because it's a door boss fight, you'll also just want to use all of your mitigation, all of your DPS tools to get past this as easily as possible, because you can just reset the fight and get all of your cooldowns back as well. So for this one, we're going to be fighting two bosses. I'm going to be referring to them as the Warrior and the Paladin, because those are the classes that the bosses have. And you want one tank to start with each ad. So just pick whichever ad that you want to fight or want to take and do it like that. So first thing you want to do is pull them towards the middle, and the Paladin is also going to do a raid-wide AoE right off the bat, so put up some mitigation on that as well. And after that, we are going into an inside save mechanic coming out for the Warrior, which is called Empty Dimension. Now, this ability is going to come back a second time later into the phase, but it is going to be random if it's going to be inside save or outside save. But the first one is always going to be inside save. It's called Empty Dimension. At the same time, the Paladin is also going to be tethering a player with a tank buster. This one can be picked up by one of the tanks and taken away because it does do some AoE damage. You need to make sure you point this away from the group. To deal with this, we're going to be using a tank invuln. Reason being is that there's only two tank busters in this phase, and because we can get our cooldowns back by wiping anyways, we just want to use our invulns on them so that we can use our normal tank mitigation to mitigate raid-wide AoEs that are together with like auto attacks and such, because there's a lot of outgoing damage here, so that's why we decided to use our invulns. If you want to use invulns on both of the tank busters, I'd recommend that the Warrior tank takes the first tank buster and the Paladin tank takes the second tank buster, because the second tank buster will always go onto the tank of the Paladin, whereas the first one, you can choose whoever picks it up. So for this, we have the group stack behind, and then we have me take the tank buster. Together with this, there's also going to be a stack AoE on everyone that did not take the tank buster, so make sure you stack together, because as you can see right here, I'm taking the tank buster, but the rest of the group takes a lot of AoE damage here as well, so you need to make sure you have some mitigation up for that. After this, our Paladin is going to jump away, so when you're doing your opener and everything, you want to make sure that you focus down the Paladin as much as possible, because he's going to be untargetable for a very long time in this phase. So Paladin jumps away, Warrior jumps to the middle, and he will start casting Hyperdimensional Slash on 4 random players. This is why we are using our markers. This will do two things. First of all, or actually 3 I guess. First of all, 4 players with the markers will get a laser beam that will also leave behind a portal where this laser beam intersects with the arena. These portals need to be in the corners of the map, because whenever a player or a boss comes close to them, they will deal damage. If a player comes close, they're pretty much dead if they're not a tank. If a boss comes close, they will explode for raid-wide damage, which you probably won't be able to survive that. So that's why we want them in the corners, because when the Paladin comes back, he's going to go to all of the cardinals of the map. Secondly, if these two lasers are too close to each other, you're also going to die because they give a magic vuln up. Third thing of the mechanic is that the 4 players that do not have a marker right here will also get a cleave. So you need to make sure you're all stacked together and then also pop some mitigation. So 4 first players go on the north side, get their laser beams, we get the AoE, and then the other 4 players get their laser beams, whereas the 4 laser beam players on the first set now get the cleave. After this, you need to make sure to find where the Paladin dropped down. Now in our case, he dropped on the west. You can see like a little puff of smoke. You'll see him on the screen in just a second. So just look at where he dropped. As you can see, there he is. And then we're going to have two things happening. First of all, we have another raid-wide AoE coming from our Paladin, so make sure you put some mitigation up. Hurts quite a bit. I'm accidentally killing my white mage here. Secondly, our Warrior is doing a knockback, so you want to make sure that you use arm's length and surecast here, so you don't get knocked back too far. You won't get knocked back into the wall if you're like in the middle of the map, but still, might as well just mitigate it so you can keep more uptime on the boss. After this is done, we want to move to the south of the arena. Reasoning being is that our paladin is going to start dashing. Now he'll always dash left, right, bottom, or right, left, bottom. So that's why we want to move south first. While we're moving south, we look at where he is dashing and we're going to the direction that he dashed in. The safe spot for this entire mechanic is going to be this little arrow that you can see on the map as well. So you just want to move to the point of the arrow on the side that the boss was dashing. So I'm very quickly going to rewind a second so you can see him here north. He's dashing left, meaning that we are also going to go left, and that is that. The only player that wants to split off from the group here is the tank that is tanking the paladin, because he is going to get a big fat tank buster on his face that does do some AoE damage. So you want to make sure that they are away from the group. And then you'll see him dash down right here. So this is where we use our second tank invuln. Now, after he drops down right here, our paladin is going to try and clemency the warrior. And if he gets the clemency off, like, you're probably not going to make the DPS check. This can get silenced. This will happen 3 times as well. So the way how we handle this is we have the tank that is taking the tank buster right here, silence the first one. The second silence is being handled by our ranged player, and I am going to be taking care of the third silence. And I'll also let you know when those happen. So this is where the first silence needs to happen, right here. Then we're pulling both of the bosses to the middle for the next mechanic. This is going to be PlayStation mechanic, as we like to call it. So this is semi-random depending on the group that, or depending on your role. You can only get a specific amount of markers, like for example tanks can only get purple and blue, healers can only get, I believe it is blue and green, and then DPS have like a different set as well. But honestly, look at what markers you have and adjust. This is why we have our markers color-coded, so that we can run to our closest marker that we're opposite of each other. You want to be on the opposite side because you're getting chained together, so you need to break those chains, and on top of that, every player will also get an individual AoE as well. If you overlap AoEs, you're gonna die because they give a magic phone up. If one player is dead, somebody else is going to get hit twice and also die. So you really need to make sure that everybody else is alive for this mechanic. So we position ourselves depending on the colors of our markers, and then we're gonna get knocked back right here. One small tip for warrior players, this is usually where your inner release is still active. So you need to make a macro to turn off the inner strength buff that you get. That's the one that prevents you from getting knocked back. So highly recommend you make a macro for that so you can easily toggle that off, because otherwise you're going to be killing people here. So just small tip right there. So get knocked back, we get our individual AoEs, and then we are going back to the middle. Right here, you might not have caught it. I'll rewind real quick. So after the knockback happens, this is also where the second silence needs to happen. It happened right there, so also to keep in mind. And then we're just going to be putting both bosses back into the middle. Then we have another raid-wide AoE coming from our paladin, and this is where our warrior does the second empty dimension. Now, as I mentioned before, this can be inside save or outside save. Empty dimension is inside save, full dimension is outside save. Kind of easy to remember. Empty, just go inside. Full means out. It's not that big of an AoE when it's outside save either, but just respect it if you don't know exactly how big it is going to be. So there we go. And then our third silence is coming up right here as well. There we go, silenced. And that's pretty much the end of the phase. There's going to be one more raid-wide AoE, which will start casting right here, but then we end up killing it. And that is that. Now you also need to make sure that both bosses die like within a second of each other, because otherwise the other boss is going to enrage. You can't kill it and he'll wipe the group. So you need to make sure that they die around the same time. After this, we run west, and then we start DPSing Sir Charibert or Black Mage. Now there's going to be a few things happening here. First of all, Horsefant is going to run onto the arena and going to start block Sir Zephyrin's spear. This spear, as long as Horsefant is alive, will do a pulsating AoE, so you need to put up some mitigation and some healing right here. Second thing that will happen is Sir Charibert will cleave the two closest persons periodically. This will happen 4 times, and they will just take a cleave to the face, which deals damage, and they will also get a debuff that when it expires will drop a puddle. So the way we did this is we have our healers go first, then our melees, then ranged, and then tanks. Reasoning behind that is because we can then have our healers move far away from the boss, our melees drop the puddles close, ranged drop it far, tanks drop it close so that you can always keep full uptime. Another reasoning behind the order in which we do this is because this mechanic comes back a second time in the rewind phase or the intermission, and there's a lot of outgoing healing needed there. So that's why we want to get our healers out of the way first so that they can just focus on healing for the rest of the mechanic. We have our tanks go last because they have to do a tank LB at that point. So that's why we do it the way that we do it. So our healers get into position for their cleaves. They get it right here. They move to the back of the map to drop their puddle. Then our melees take their cleaves. They drop their puddle in the middle, and here you can see the puddle exploding from our healers. Our ranged, they go to the back, and then our tanks for the final set of cleaves. And then the boss needs to be below 30% HP, but that should not be a problem. And all that needs to happen here is that one person survives to go into phase 2. And then very important, hit Thordan, because if you aggro Thordan but you don't hit him, you will actually not save the checkpoint. So hit him with a few GCDs before you run into the wall. Then we go into phase 2. Now for phase 2 we have our markers a little bit different. We're still using color-coded stuff. So as you can see, colors are opposite of each other. They're going to be on alt cardinals and intercardinals. One other thing to note here is that our arena has fidget spinners on each cardinal and intercardinal. We'll be using those for our save spots as well. And then the other markings in between the fidget spinners, we're going to be making use of those as well. So just something to keep in mind. So first thing that Thordan is going to do is Ascalon's Mercy Concealed. This will bait cleaves on all your players at the end of the cast bar. So all you need to do for this is move to the side at the end of the cast bar, or when Thordan stabs the floor. After that, there is a triple cleave onto your main tank. This hurts a lot, so make sure that you put up some mitigation for that. It's essentially a tank buster that hits 3 times. After that, we go into Strength of the Ward, our first big mechanic. For this, we want to split into 2 light party groups. Now, throughout the entire fight, we're going to be using light parties a couple times. So just make some light party groups here and stick to them. Highly recommend you take 1 tank, 1 healer, 1 ranged, and 1 melee. And you'll see why in just a second when we go into the second big mechanic here. So for the first part of this mechanic, you will need to find where the 3 knights are dashing from. There's going to be 3 knights spawning around the edge of the arena, and they're going to be dashing through the middle of the arena. So we can see 1 knight here on D, 1 knight on C, nothing on B, and 1 on A. So we found all of our knights. The yellow marker did not have a knight, so it means yellow markers are safe. So those are our safe spots. There's also going to be a warrior here in the middle who's going to do an earthquake that will pulsate outside of the arena, so you'll need to make sure that you dodge that as well. Then for our safe spot, we have 1 safe spot on 1 yellow marker, 1 on the other. We have 1 player go on the fidget spinner, 2 players to the south, 5 little like nudges away from the fidget spinner, and we have 1 player stand closer to the inside of the arena. You can't really see me because the marker is covering me because I'm a Lalafell, but essentially I'm standing right here on where you can see the big 2 on the screen. You can also use the arena to position yourself for this. You see these blue like spikes coming out of the arena. Stand slightly below the tip of this and you're going to be safe. And then you can see the AoEs right here. So I'm right here, 1 left, 1 right, and then 1 at the bottom as well. The reason why we're spread out is because everybody gets a personal AoE as well, which is the lightning storm that is casting. After this, we have our knights that dash through the arena, and we have our earthquake that is pulsating. Now, very important for the earthquake, you need to dodge this after 3 pulses. You can dodge on the first and the second, but after the third one, you need to dodge. Reason being is that Thordan is doing his cleaves again, Ascalon's Mercy Concealed, and it coincides with about the 3rd pulse of this earthquake. So at the 3rd pulse, you want to make sure that you dodge it. If you dodge it faster than the 3rd pulse, you want to make sure that you stay kind of like in line with your marker, so that the players that are still needing to make their dodge don't have to like run all the way to the other side of the arena just to not get hit by your cleave. So dodge these, run to the side for Ascalon's Mercy Concealed, and then Thordan is going to dash to a cardinal or an intercardinal. Which one is random, but he will always jump opposite to these 2 paladins. So if you know where the 2 paladins are, you know where Thordan is going to be as well, which in this case is going to be our 2 marker. Thordan is going to be our relative north here. So there's going to be a couple things happening. 3 non-tanks will get a blue debuff, 3 non-tanks will get nothing, and 2 tanks need to pick up a tank buster. You can see these expanding AoEs, these black and red ones, they will just expand. You need to not stand in these. You also have tower spawning, but I'll talk about those in just a second. So first thing that needs to happen. Players with the blue AoE need to go east, south, and west. Again, if Torden is our relative north. These will do a big AoE that will also apply a magic vuln up, so it's important that nobody else gets hit by these. If you're standing east and west, you'll also want to stand a tiny bit more to the south side of the arena, just to make sure that you don't hit your tanks. Because if a tank gets hit by this and they're not using a tank invuln for the tank buster, they're gonna die. So that's kind of important right there. The other 3 players that don't have anything are going to stand underneath Torden, and one of them will be targeted with a stack AoE. Who that's gonna be, you don't know, so that's why you all stack together. Our 2 tanks are going to be taking tethers, kind of like you saw in phase 1, away from one of the 3 random players that didn't have a debuff, and they're going to be stacking together with the group to share the share AoE, because 5 people in a stack or 3 people, quite a lot of difference in the damage that you're going to be taking. You do need to make sure that your tanks are far enough away from the group to not hit them with your tank busters though, and there's also a little trick that you can do, which you will see me doing as well. So our blue marker players are going to move to east, south, and west. Ideally, you want to do what my scholar is doing here, and that is move through south. So he's going to walk around the ad so he doesn't steal my tether. I'm taking my tether here, and what you can do right here after the AoE goes out, there is a very tiny timing, I guess you could say, during which you can jump into it before you get stunned by the tank buster. So I'm still taking the Dragon's Rage, which is the shared AoE that the 3 players are taking here, but I'm also going to jump away so that my co-tank does not accidentally get cleaved by my tank buster, because I'm using an invuln, so I'm fine, but if my tank buster accidentally cleaves my co-tank, he's probably going to die. Then we also have our towers spawning right here. Very simple, east, south, and west are taken by the players that were east, south, and west with their blue debuff. The 3 towers in north are for the 3 DPS or healer players that were stacking together. So just like kind of do a light spread in the stack position, and then you kind of know where to go, or you can just call out, I'm going left, middle, or right. And then your tanks are taking their tank busters here, and then they go back to Torden. So I'll just quickly rewind to the beginning of this mechanic. I'll just make it simple. So we look where our knights are, we go to the safe spot, 2 people middle, 2 people on the side, and then of course 1 is closer to middle. You dodge your Earthquake, right here. You dodge your Ascalon's Mercy Concealed. Look where Torden is. Blue players east, south, west, everybody else north. Your tanks get ready to pick up the tank busters. There we go. And then I'm going to be jumping into the AoE after it's resolved, just to give some extra space to my co-tank, and then everybody takes their towers. After this, Torden will cast Ancient Quagga. This is a raid-wide AoE, so put up some mitigation for this. And then we go into a tank buster. This is going to be a 2-part tank buster, Heavenly Heal into the triple cleave that we saw at the beginning. Heavenly Heal puts a debuff on the main tank, so you either need to do a tank swap, like we do right here, or you need to use a tank invuln. Whichever you use is up to you. Then we go into the second big mechanic, Sanctity of the Ward. This is again a 2-parter. So for part 1, we want to be spreading into our light party groups again. First thing that you want to do is locate where the Dark Knight is. The Dark Knight is this one on the outsider ring of the arena. Group 2 is going to the Dark Knight, Group 1 is going opposite of the Dark Knight. Now in my case, I'm in Group 1. What's then gonna happen is 2 players will get a marker, Marker 1 and Marker 2. What's important is that the player with Marker 1 goes into Group 1 and player with Marker 2 goes into Group 2. This means that if I, from Group 1, end up getting a 2 marker, I need to call out my role and switch with my Dark Knight. In this case, my Dark Knight has Group 2, so we're fine. So that's essentially why we put 1 role of each in each group, because that way if you need to do a call out here, you just say tank swap, ranged swap, healer swap, or melee swap, in case you need to switch your groups. But in this case, we didn't need to swap, so it's fine. So Group 1 moves opposite of the Dark Knight, Group 2 moves towards the Dark Knight. Reason why that's important is because the Dark Knight will plunge onto that group and then start alternating, and it's proximity based damage. So that's why we need to go opposite of the Dark Knight. Another thing that you need to do is you need to look out to the outside of the arena to see where Torden is. Torden is here. And then also where the big eye is, that's one's over here. You need to look away from both. So just face your camera, or well, your player, your character away from these two gaze attacks. Third thing that needs to happen is you need to look to these knights in the middle, because we're needing to do a dodge right here. I'm going to try to rewind a little bit so that you can see it better. And you'll either need to rotate clockwise or counterclockwise. The direction you go in depends on where the knights are facing. If they are facing like this, they're looking at each other, we go clockwise. If they have their backs face to each other, we go counterclockwise. So in this case, we go clockwise. So we run to our safe spots, we look away from Torden and the Eye, our Dark Knight starts plunging, and then we go into our safe spots. So the first safe spot is going to be 3 or 4 notches away from your fidget spin. You can stand in between 3 and 4, you can stand on 3 and 4. As long as you're next to the edge of the arena, you'll be fine. Safe spot can be very tiny, as you can see right here, very tiny safe spot. After this goes out, we keep moving and we go 3 notches over from the second fidget spinner. So simple enough. Now, these safe spots are always going to be the same, but the order in which you get the safe spot might be different. So in this case, we ended up getting the tiny safe spot first and the big safe spot second. But you can get the big safe spot first and the tiny one second. So that's the tiny one, this is the big one. So depending on which one you get first, you'll get the other one second. After this, Torden is going to jump north, so he'll always be in the same position, and then we split into 4 groups. So we again split into a group of a healer and a tank together with a DPS player. The reason being is that we want to have one of each on each cardinal of the arena. So here we're gonna get 2 meteors. We always decided that our meteors will go north and south. Technically you can also do it east and west, which would have been easier in this case, but we always decided to keep it consistent. North and south is for our meteors. First thing that you need to know is the group that meteors are going on. In this case, it's on our DPS players. The reason why we need to know this is because our meteor group is always moving to the outside of the arena to take your towers. The non-meteor group gets priority on the inside towers. The way how you prioritize who stays in and who goes out depends on your pizza slice of the arena. Very simple. If you have 2 towers, both players move out. If you have 1 tower, the meteor role will move out. So in our case, our meteor role are our DPS players. So they're going north and south. And then we see where we need to go. Now in this case, I'm just gonna rewind real quick so I can show you again. I'll also show some other examples of all the different patterns that you can get. But in our case, we have 2 meteors on my side. We have 1 in the south side. What you want to try to do is you always, or not meteors, towers. What you want to do is you always want to take towers as much as opposite of each other as possible. So because we have 1 on the right here, and I have 1 on the right when I look to north again on my side as well, that means that our 2 meteor players want to take those towers. So I, as the non-meteor player, will take the middle tower. I'll again show some other examples of this later as well. So the towers go out. Now after this, we want to position ourselves, and also meteors start dropping here, into the towers. The way how we gave priority is the 2 meteor players get the north and south tower. The meteor role that did not get a tower takes east and west. And then the non-meteor role will start taking intercardinal towers. That is why I went from north to northeast. After this, you also want to make sure that the people that stayed on the inside will also adjust to the players that are on the outside. And so in this case, I told my white mage to move because like otherwise I'm going to just make it too confusing for other players as well. Something I forgot to mention is these ice AoEs. They weren't here at the start, so I'm going to rewind real quick. The fire AoEs spawn pretty much immediately, which is why you want to be like in the cardinals. As you can see, the fire AoEs are spawning here. The ice AoEs are shared AoE damage, so that is why you want to be split in a tank and healer with the DPS, because it's going to be targeting one of the 2 roles. Either all the DPS get it or all the tanks and healers get it. So that's why you want to stay together with 2 of them, because it is shared damage and they are dropped on your players. So you need to make sure you're standing kind of like in the middle between the outside and the inside of the arena. As you can see here, the ice AoE appears as well. So they are baited by players. You need to make sure that you give enough space. After the 4th meteor has dropped, the warrior in the middle will start casting Fate Unmoving, which is the knockback. So you want to make sure you use your arm's length and your shirt cast here. Unless you're in the middle, you can use the knockback to just get knocked back into your tower. If you do accidentally press it, you can always press sprint to just very quickly get to the outside of the arena as well. And that is the end of this mechanic. Now, because there are so many different varieties, I have a little picture here in Photoshop, this for later mechanic. These are all the possibilities for the meteors, and they can also be flipped. Like, for example, this is the cursed pattern. This pattern can also be flipped, so it can either be the north person that is getting the sucky part or the south person. So the way how this works, I'm just gonna very quickly take, maybe I'll just turn this blue or something so you can kind of see the contrast. So because we're always going north and south for our meteors, I'm just only going to be explaining those two. So when it comes down to looking at whether you need to go out or not, you're looking at your pizza slice. What do I mean with a pizza slice? This is a pizza slice. So in my case, because I'm north, this is all what I'm going to be looking at. So in this case, we have two towers right here, meaning that I want to go outside regardless if I have meteor or not. Otherwise, if, for example, here in the south side, we only have one tower, only the meteor roll wants to go out here. In terms of how you position for your meteors, you always want to try and get opposite. So in this case, you can just quickly go opposite like that and you're fixed. So you just communicate, I have a tower on the left. That way the person south knows that they need to go left as well. If, for example, we're taking this one here, you have a tower north and northwest. So this person can say middle left. That way the person south can say middle. And then you know that the towers, or two meteor players, need to go on the north and the south towers in the middle, and then the non-meteor player knows that they need to take the other tower right here. In terms of like positioning for if you have a little bit more of a cursed pattern, I guess you could say, kind of like this one down here, is also very simple. So in this case, the player south only has one option, south. That way, the player that is north can also say, oh, I have my tower on the right, let's say. That way, the player that is north, instead of standing in the middle of the tower to drop their first meteor, they can stand on the edge, closest to the middle. And then this way, the player that is south can also stand as much on the edge as possible so that there is more space to move. Because like from this, there's going to be much more space than if you have to go this, for example, like if they both stand on this side. So that is why you sometimes want to be like on the edge of your tower so that you can give as much space as possible for the person that has to bait meteors. So in this case down here as well, this player on the north side will want to stand as much to the middle as possible, whereas the player on south will want to stand as much away from the middle as possible, so they again have the most space possible to drop their meteors. There is only one cursed pattern, which is this one down here. The reason why it is cursed is because the tower are on the same side of the map. Ideally what you want to do here is you want to go east and west instead of north and south, but it's kind of hard to adjust to that if you like don't realize it in time. So what you can do here is you start here and here to drop your meteors, and then you just pray to God that you manage to space your meteor correctly as you walk around the edge of the arena, so that you don't like kill yourselves, I guess you could say. It is possible to do this. I have like a clip on my YouTube for this as well where I do it correctly, but I can probably count the amount of times that my group has been able to do this successfully on one hand. So it is very difficult to get this right, and also to get it consistent as well. So if you get the cursed pattern, we always just expected a wipe, but try and do your best to do it correctly. Alternatively, what you can also do is like run through the middle and just ask your healers to heal you until the mechanic is over, and then you just die to the bleed. But yeah, just essentially try to make it work. So that's how that kind of works. I'll just quickly rewind the mechanic so you can see that one more time. So meteors go out, they go north and south, adjust if needed. Meteor roll goes outside, unless you have two towers. If you have two towers, both players go outside for your towers. First towers go out, meteors start dropping. Cardinals for the meteor group, intercardinals for the non-meteor group. Knockback happens after the first meteor drops, you can start pressing your knockback invuln. Take all the towers, and that is the end of the mechanic. Then you want to put up some mitigation, because Torden is coming back, where his sword is in the floor, and he's going to start casting his ultimate attack. This hurts quite a bit, so put up some mitigation. Does not have a cast bar, but if you want to like time your reprisal or something, 1 or 2 GCDs into when he's targetable is when you will want to do that. Then he's gonna fling his way to the middle. This doesn't do damage, by the way. Don't have to worry about that. And then we have Broad Swing. Very simple. He's gonna slash 3 times, twice in front, 1 in the back. You always want to start in the back, and then you move into where his first slice was. So in this case it was right. He's gonna redirect himself, so stand at the back again. First hit, move into that. And that is the end of this phase. He's gonna start casting his Enrage right here. And that is that. We also decide to delay our DPS here a little bit so that we can get our tank cooldowns and DPS cooldowns back, like mitigation and DPS buffs, so that we can use them on Nidhogg. Because Nidhogg is a very spicy phase of this encounter, as it has one of the toughest DPS checks in the encounter. First, put up some mitigation, because this does a lot of damage. And then make sure that your tank immediately grabs aggro, because he's going to be stabbed in the face a few times. This is a cleave, so make sure it's pointing away from the group, and then put up some light mitigation. After this we get Dive from Grace. Now there's 2 things to look at here. First off, at the beginning of the cast bar everybody gets a number. There are 3 number 1s, 2 number 2s and 3 number 3s. Secondly, at the end of this mechanic everybody is going to get a second debuff, which will indicate where you are going to be dropping your tower. So for our number 1s, they want to do a light spread around the back of the boss. So we have 1 east, south and west, and everybody else stand in the front of the boss. I'm going to be explaining this mechanic a couple of different times because, like, essentially what you'll be doing depends on the number that you are. Now at the end of the cast bar right here, as you could see, everybody gets a second debuff. Now I'm going to put up or pull up another picture right here. These are the different debuffs that you can get. This one we're going to be referring to as centered, but it's called high jump. This one is back or elusive jump. This one is spine shatter dive or forward. Essentially, when you drop your tower, it is going to spawn in a different place depending on your 3 debuffs. If you have centered, it drops where you're standing. If you have elusive, it drops behind where your character is facing. If you have spine shatter, it drops in front of where your character is facing. In terms of the distance that the tower will spawn from you, it is exactly the boss's hitbox. So that is why we are going to be using these little arrows on the boss's hitbox for the players number 1 and number 3, and for our 2s we're going to be using the arena. So you can see this line of tiles, they have like a little bit of a different indication compared to the rest of the arena. You want to stand behind that line and then you'll be fine to bait your towers as well. Also remember this line because this will come back in phase 6, so I'll be referring to that again when we get there. So in terms of how this kind of plays out, we have player 1s bait their first towers, then we have number 3s cover the 1 towers. While the number 3s are covering the 1 towers, number 2s are dropping their towers, which will then be covered by the number 1s afterwards. After that, number 3s drop their towers and they will be covered by the number 2s and a number 1, because there's only 2 towers instead of 3. So the player that's in south will cover a 3 tower as well. But I'll run you through it 3 times so that you can kind of see like the perspective of each of these groups. So after this locks in, we get Nash and Lash or Lash and Nash. Depending on where Nash and Lash are in the cast, it's going to be in and out or out then in. Nash is out, Lash is in. So again, remember where they are in the cast bar. In this case, it is Nash and Lash, meaning that we go outside save, inside save. And you'll see how this locks in as well. At the end of the cast bar, this will also do a stack damage on someone that is not dropping a tower. So in this case, the 1 players are dropping a tower, so they can't get it. Everybody else can. So that is why we're going to be stacking together in front of the boss, while also putting some mitigation up. So Nash and Lash is gonna finish casting. Everybody that is a 3 player, get ready to cover the rest. Also, something I forgot to mention is that your debuffs of centered, forward, backward are fixed. So either everybody is gonna get centered in terms of like within your own number. So all number 1s can get all centered like it is right here, or they will all get something different. If you're a 2 player, you either get both centered or both front and back. If you are a 3 player, it's again either all centered or all different. The way how we do this is in our 1 numbers case, we have our light spread at the beginning of the mechanic. That way, if everybody gets centered, they're already in position. If you all get a different debuff though, the centered player needs to be at south of the boss, and then your forward and back need to be east and west. You can do this random if you want to do that. We made a priority system for it. Our player with forward goes to the 3 marker, which is where my scholar is standing right here. Our player with the back one goes to the C marker, which is where my monk is standing on the left side on my POV. We're keeping this priority system for our 3 players as well. So if we all get centered, we need to call it out. You're saying back, left, right, or you're calling out the markers like 3 or C. But if everybody gets a different one, you know where you need to go without requiring communication. So that's why we made that system in place. Same thing for our 2 markers. They are going to be either positioning themselves and like jump up and down to indicate they're going left or right. If they have front or back, then they just go depending on the debuff that they get, either to 3 or to the C side, depending on if they're front or back. So, end of cast bar of Nash and Lash, we get our rate wide AoE here. People that are 3 are getting in position to cover the tower, so we have our outside save right here. Tower spawn, inside save. As soon as these towers go off, by the way, you can start moving out again, so you don't have to worry about the animation of the outside save here. It's something to keep in mind. Also, after a tower has been taken, the closest player to that tower will also bait a Garrus Coggles. As you can see, the bosses drop down and they start facing the nearest player that they can find, essentially. You want to point those outward away from the group so that their Garrus Coggles go to the outside. Here, our 2 players will also bait their towers. They just drop them right there. 3 players want to dodge their Garrus Coggles. Then the 1 players that were east and west are going to be covering the 2 towers that are also east and west. So same space as where they drop their tower, they're going to be taking their tower. Again, Nash and Lash put up some mitigation, which is why I run middle to give a shake it off. This is also where our 3 players are dropping their towers. So mitigation, make sure everybody is stacked together in the front. Towers are dropped, outside save, inside save. The 2 players, east and west, take east and west again, and our 1 player that dropped south will cover south. And then we have inside save again, bait your Garrus Coggles outside. And then we have 2 auto attacks that are cleaves onto the main tank, so make sure that you're kind of away from the group. And then we end the mechanic with a Dragon Lance. This will face 1 random player and it will do a cleave towards them. It's a tiny cleave, as you can see right there, so you don't need to be too far out. Now I'll rewind this mechanic 3 times so that you can see how it goes for each marker. So for our 1 players, first you'll want to go and stand in your positions, either predetermined because you're all centered or depending on your debuff. We have in and out. So first, at the end of the cast bar, you drop your tower. Then everybody just moves north for this, and then dodge the in and out correctly. Then you get ready to take the 2 towers, so 2 players drop here. The 1 players that were east and west now take the towers that are east and west as well. And the final 1 player is getting ready to take the south tower of the 3 players. So again, towers have been taken, Garrus Coggles have been baited, and now the final 1 player takes the south tower here and baits the Garrus Coggle outwards. End of the mechanic. For our 2 players, our 2 players are getting ready north of the boss. They kind of indicate where they want to go by just standing left and right. So as you can see, Black Mage is standing on the right, White Mage is standing on the left, so they go left and right for their towers as well. You get ready for the AoE right here, and then you go out and then in because it's Nash and Lash. So out, in, and then after this in, you go and bait your 2 towers, so left and right, behind this line, as I mentioned before. The line is very important. After these towers go out, you go back to the group to stack for Nash and Lash, and after that little AoE goes out, you move east and west to cover the 3 towers depending on where you took your 2 tower. So the person is our Black Mage right here that took his tower on 4 is going to go here on the same side. The White Mage took her tower on B, so she's staying in that line as well. So you always keep it the same. And then again, after these towers are done, you bait them outwards. For our 3 players, exactly the same thing. 3 players either call out or you go depending on your debuffs. I am south, so I am going south to cover the tower there. I take the 1 tower. I bait my Gyros Goggle outwards. Then I dodge the Gyros Goggle. Then I'm gonna be baiting my tower south as well. 3 players have the easiest job here. And then after you drop your tower, you do the in and out mechanic. So it's out then in, because it was Nash then Lash. And then that is the end of the mechanic. Main tank, make sure that you're away from the group. And then we have Dragonlance. So after this is done, we're going to have 4 towers spawning, all on the intercardinals. We're going to have 1 ranged in each and 1 melee in each. That way it's very easy to adjust. So either you're going to have 2 or more towers on your tower, that means you can stay. If you only have 1 tower on your position, that means you need to adjust. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 2, and then 3. You can't really see it, but that's the only possibility that we have. So the melee that was in this tower on D needs to run into the tower that has 3. You can also get 1, 1, 3, 3. That means that the players in the 1 towers need to go stack with one of the 3 towers. You can also have 1, 1, 2, 4, for example. That's also possible. So there are a couple of different possibilities here. Essentially, if you have 1 in your tower, the melee needs to adjust and go stand in a tower that has more than 2. If you have 2 in your tower, you can always stay. Simple as that. Again, just like with every other tower in this phase, after these resolve, Nidhogg dives on your face, and these need to be baited because they're going to do Gyros Goggle again. All but 1. One of these towers is going to be tethering a player instead and will do a tank buster on them. The actual Nidhogg that's in the middle of the arena is also going to be tethering a random player and also do a tank buster on them. So in this case, I will always take the tether from Nidhogg in the middle. My co-tank will always take the tether from a tower. So I'm going to be grabbing the tether here from the middle. My Dark Knight is going to be taking up the tether from the other one. And then we get double tank busters. Highly recommend you have 1 tank use an invuln here and the other tank use cooldowns, because this tank buster hurts like a bitch. So you want to make sure you just pop all of your mitigation, and your co-tank also give their mitigation to you while they use their invuln, or the other way around. If you use your invuln, give your mitigation to your co-tank, they'll need it. It really hurts a lot. As you could see, I had all of my cooldowns here, plus healer mitigation, plus my co-tank, and I almost died to it. So yeah, you can do this by having both tanks cooldown through it, but they're both gonna drop incredibly low, so I would not advise that. After this, Nidhogg is going to be cleaving the main tank 5 times, so it is a very chill part of the phase. Just make sure that your main tank does not die to this. And after the 5th auto attack, he is going to turn south and do a Dragonlance. This one is always facing south for some reason, so you always know that this is going to happen. And then he's going to start casting his Enrage. The Enrage has a very long cast time, so you have plenty of time to DPS him down. Then we go into phase 4. You want to put up some mitigation over here and heal up, because there's going to be some rate-wide damage at the beginning. You'll also want to stack together. Now, I'm not quite sure if you can see him, but Alphino is on the field. He is standing in between our group. And 1 random player is also going to get a tether. Now, Alphino will get a tether and 1 random player will get a tether. Essentially, what you want to do is you want to stack together, because both Horsefant and Lady Iceheart are going to be giving us 2 buffs. And you need both buffs to deal damage to the eyes that are going to be spawning. So, everybody is stacked together. We get our 2 debuffs here. And we're going to spread left and right into our 2 light party groups again that we have been using throughout this entire fight. This is the first raid-wide AoE. This one will also apply a bleed on your party, so make sure that you have some mitigation and that you're healing up. What's important here is that your 2 ranged players that are on the right side of the arena are actually DPSing the left eye. Now, the eyes are kind of called weird here, like the eye on the right is called left eye on the left is called the right eye. So I'm just going to be referring to them as blue and red. The eye that needs to be DPS down first is the blue one. So the players over here, my dancer and my white mage are on my side. They're actually DPSing the eye on the left side that you can't see on the screen, because that one needs to die first. Only the melee should be hitting the red eye here. Reason being is that the red eye is going to be killing itself, essentially. After this is done, Hatebound starts casting, and this will tether 4 players. 4 players are tethered to the red eye, 4 players are tethered to the blue eye. The way this works is whenever you take damage, if you are a blue tether, you're healing the blue eye. If you're a red tether, you're dealing damage to the red eye. So essentially what you want to do is every time you're taking damage, you want to have a red tether. When you're not taking damage, you want to have a blue tether. So because we want to make this consistent, this phase, we're always going to have our melee players start off with a red tether and ranged players with a blue tether. The way you switch these tethers is by just standing on top of each other. And when you switch a tether, you get a debuff that prevents you from switching again for 3 seconds. We're going to be making use of this by creating a mosh pit in the middle, essentially. So if you need to switch tethers, me and my dancer like just switching with each other if we could. But you'll see everybody else that needs to switch tethers are gonna run to the middle of the arena because they just need to get the different color, and because they can't switch again immediately for 3 seconds, it won't actually like mess things up. As you can see, everybody just runs mid to switch tethers. We put up some mitigation here as well, and then we're going to be starting to take the orbs. Now orbs need to grow twice before you take them. The yellow one will grow fast, the blue one grows slow, so the yellow one you want to take first. The yellow one is also shared damage, whereas the blue one only does single target damage. So we have our melee players standing together with a tank to take these yellow ones, and we have our healer and our ranged on each side take a blue orb. So this is why our melees starts with a red tether, so that when it grows right here, they can run in. If you're a tank, you'll also want to pop a cooldown here, because you are taking auto attacks while the entire phase is going on. So you do want to have something up so that you don't get chunked out by the orb that you're taking, and then also from like follow-up auto attacks. After you take the yellow orb, you want to switch with your ranged players so that they get a red tether so that they can take the blue orbs once they have grown twice. After this, everybody will want to move to the blue eye. We have our 4 ranged players stand on the intercardinals. We have our melees stand in the middle of the blue eye. And now we are going to be getting dives. Now these dives will target 2 random players that have a red tether. And you need to go pick them up because it gives them a piercing resistance down, so they can't get hit by a dive twice in quick succession. The way we do this is we have our tanks take the first set, melees take the second set, and the third swap happens with the players that get the first dive. So in this case, my dancer, I believe, is going to get the first dive. That means that he is the last person that needs to swap. So it's going to be tanks, melees, and then flicks players, as we like to call them. The way how we prioritized how we're going to be taking these tethers is based on clockwise or counterclockwise. So because you have fixed groups for tanks and melees, I am always going to look clockwise. So I'm starting with dancer, white mage, scholar. I'll never have black mage. And my co-tank is going to look counterclockwise. So they go black mage, scholar, white mage, and then they can never have dancer. When it comes down to our flex players, they just call out clockwise or counterclockwise, and then they know what their priority is going to be. So right here we have Mirage Dive starting casting. 2 players get the dive. Me and my co-tank pick up the tethers. They go to the middle. Second set, melees go and switch. And then third set is going to be for our flex players right here. And then we have one last set dropping, but we don't need to switch after this. Once this is done, you need to make sure that the blue eye dies before it can cast Steep Enrage, because if both eyes are allowed to cast Steep Enrage, it's just going to lead to a wipe, so you don't want to have that happen. And then you need to go and switch over to the red eye to kill that one as well. If the red eye manages to finish casting its AoE and you actually take damage from this, the blue eye will respawn with 1 or 2% HP, so you'll need to start DPSing it down again as well. But because we ended up killing it before the AoE actually did damage, the blue eye stayed dead as well. And then we go into our rewind transition. The reason why we stand next to the blue eye here is because we'll already be in position for where the bosses will be taking us. And this is going to be very similar to phase 1, just that you're going to be taking a lot more damage, and that we also need a tank LB. The tank LB timing is right here. Whenever you see Horsefant run onto the field, you want to press that tank LB button. The reasoning why there's going to be a lot more healing needed here is because the spear is going to keep pulsating on Horsefant. If Horsefant dies phase is over essentially, and it's going to be a reset. So you want to keep him alive. That is why we use our tank LB to make it so that we can actually heal Haurchefant. So our healers will both need to be healing the group here to heal through the constant raid-wide damage that's coming out, and they'll also need to heal Haurchefant. Outside of that, everything else take the same. So our healers take their cleave, gonna drop the puddle. Melees take their cleave, gonna drop the puddle. Ranged take their cleave, and they're gonna drop the puddle. And then our tanks take their cleave at the end. The AD needs to be below 30% HP. Now, because you have your 2-minute buffs here, your healers can literally just focus on healing and almost nothing else. So you shouldn't really have to worry about the DPS check here. Focus on healing and mitigating. And also, like, use personal mitigation. Like, for example, me and the Dark Knight are using our personal mitigation to help the DPS survive as well. And then our DPS are also using their personal stuff, like, for example, Riddle of Earth, Shade Shift. Essentially, if you have personal mitigation to use here, use it to try and keep yourself alive. After this is done, we have Pure of Heart, the raid-wide AoE, so you want to mitigate that. And once that is done, there is no more outgoing damage on your players, and you need to make sure that you kill the spear before it manages to cast Pierce. Also, a little tip, if you have a white mage, they can use Clemency on Haurchefant, so it makes healing him a lot easier. And then we get ready to go into phase 5. Here we're going to be fighting against Thordan again. He'll be doing some stuff at the beginning, which is just resurrecting the dragons and then giving himself a damage up buff. So nothing's really happening here, you can just freely DPS away. And after this, he is going to be hitting your main tank with 2 auto attacks. These do a fair amount of damage, so you want to put up some light mitigation for this, like TBM, Bloodwetting, Divine Benison, that kind of stuff. Nothing too much. And then we have Wrath of the Heavens, the first big mechanic. Also the hardest one of the two in my opinion. First thing that you need to do, locate where the knights and the dragon spawn. This is like your relative north, I guess you could say. I got lucky, they spawned in my face, so I don't have to like go looking for them. We're going to be using this as our relative north, as I mentioned. So the 2 tethered players, they're going to be tethered to one of these knights. This is proximity damage. They want to run to the opposite side of the arena. They want to stand about in the middle between these 2 markers, but then of course on the opposite side of the arena. We have 1 player with a blue marker, exactly the same as in phase 2, does a very big AoE and puts a magic phone on everybody that gets hit by it, so nobody can get hit by it except the player with the blue marker. And then the dragon is gonna dive straight through the middle of the arena. So we have our 2 tethered players move opposite of their knight, we have our blue player move to the top left. Important that you go close to the dive, because you don't want to accidentally hit the player that is tethered to this knight. All other 5 players that don't have a debuff here move to the right side of the arena. So because I have nothing, I go to the right. Now around this timing, as you're positioning yourself for the dives, we're also going to get 2 players targeted with a Thunder, which is right here. We have my Dark Knight and my Scholar that have the Thunder debuffs. They will drop a Thunder Puddle at the end of the mechanic, which will paralyze anyone that is in that AoE, unless you were like the target for the Thunderstruck, of course. When the dive happens, about a second or so after it, like half a second, there will also be Twisters spawning underneath all players. So you need to move about a second later after the dive locks in. If you've done UCOP before, the timing here is later. So the UCOP Twisters are fast, these Twisters are slow. So we get ready, dive happens, we move to drop our Twisters, as you can see here along the edge of the arena, those are our Twisters. Then on the path of the dragon dive, I believe, we have a black mage and a warrior spawn. The warrior is going to be your final save spot. Then we have 1 random player get a green debuff. I believe this can be on just about anyone except the blue marked player. I'm not 100% sure on this, but just think everybody can get this marker. This is going to be a dive bomb marker, so you want to bait this away from the final save spot. So, because the warrior is the final save spot, this player is going to move behind the black mage. On top of that, Thordan is going to start casting Ascalon's Mercy Concealed, so everybody needs to be spread out. Now this time around you can't dodge the cleaves, you just need to make sure your cleaves aren't overlapping, because they give a debuff, so you need to make sure that everybody is spread out for that. So everybody spreads out, we have our blue marker go to the black mage, and then the AoEs go out. Now after this we have 2 more mechanics. 2 random players are going to be targeted with either an eruption or a liquid hell. Eruption explodes 4 times and also shows first. Liquid hells goes 5 times, shows second. The reason why that's important is because, like, for example, right here, if you're next to each other, you know where to kind of move if you have one of these 2 mechanics. You want to try and move along the outside of the arena so that you don't accidentally cut off the safe spot for other players. Also, if you have one of these debuffs, be like arrogant with them, I guess you could say. You are doing the mechanic, the other players, like if they're in your way, they'll move away. You don't have to worry about them. The only player that should be careful here, I guess, is the one with the blue marker, because the blue marker player cannot get hit by a liquid hell, because they'll immediately die to it, because they have the magic vuln-up. But outside of that, other players can get hit by a liquid hell, as long as they don't stay inside the fire puddle. So as you can see right here, my ninja has the eruptions, and I'm gonna get the liquid hells. So I'm just gonna bait them around the outside of the arena, and then we move into this final safe spot. Final safe spot, the group is going to be closest to Torden, and then we have the 2 Thunder players left and right on the back of the boss. Just make sure you're away from each other so that you don't clip, and that's the end of the mechanic. Torden will then do Ancient Quagga, which is his raid-wide AoE. So heal up and put up some mitigation in case that needs to happen. And then we have a Tank Buster. Heavenly Heal into Triple Cleave, exactly the same as in phase 2. I'm just going to be using Home Gang right here. And that is going to be that. And we're going into the second big mechanic, which is Death of the Heavens. For this one, we are going to be locating our warrior. Warrior becomes our relative north. So in this case, the 1 marker is north. Second thing we're going to do is we're going to be spreading out in a line. The reason why we make a line is because this makes this mechanic 100 times easier. So it's going to be very simple. If there are people that are very bad at adjusting in this mechanic, you'll want to put them on the outside of the line because they have a fixed position for the dodge. The players that are the best at adjusting to another, they need to be on the inside of the line because they have the hardest job. If there are players that are good at adjusting but like still want to keep it easy, make them like second in priority on the line on the outside because they will only have 2 possible safe spots. So second thing, or I guess third thing then that needs to happen, is players that get a Doom debuff slightly move north. As you can see, we moved north. Players that don't have a Doom debuff move south. Reason why we do that is because you can then easily see which 4 players you're going to be adjusting to, and then you know where you need to run. Players on the outside of the line go east and west. Players on the inside of the line go northeast and northwest if you're a Doom, southeast and southwest if you're a non-Doom player. Where you're gonna have to position, you'll see in just a second as well. So, because I'm a Doom and I am second in line, I am gonna go northwest. Now, for your northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest players, you don't want to stand directly on the fidget spinner either. You want to stand 2 notches over. So as you can see, 1, 2, this is where I'm going to be standing. Because otherwise you'll be getting hit by one of the dives. There are like a million AoEs going out here, so I'm not going to explain exactly what is going to happen. I'm just going to show you the safe spots for them. So the safe spots, as I mentioned before, are northwest in my case, directly next to the marker, northeast directly next to the marker, southwest and southeast again next to the marker, going north or south. So stand closer to north or south if you're dodging on an intercardinal. For those that are standing on the cardinals, you'll want your non-Doom player on the edge of the arena, directly east or west. You'll want your Doom player also directly east or west, but closer to the inside of the arena. You see this big black line or like thick ring going through the arena. That's where you want to stand on if you're a Doom player. So those are all of your safe spots. The reason why we're spread out is because everybody gets that lightning storm AoE on them again, which means that we all need to be spread out. Together with this, we're gonna have a warrior doing his earthquake shenanigans again, but we'll actually be able to use that to time our twister dodge. So again, are getting twisters here that's going to lock in at the second hit of the earthquake. So when you see the second earthquake go out, that is when you want to dodge. So we have our first earthquake go out, second earthquake we dodge, and we all run towards the middle. Now over here, we are getting another PlayStation mechanic. I'm going to show it first, and then I'm going to explain it, because this PlayStation mechanic is like 99% baitable, so very easy. Your Doom players, you will want to keep running, so I was northwest, meaning I go southeast now. Same thing for the one that was northeast, he's going southwest. Our two Doom players on east and west want to stay on the outside of the arena, because they can actually bait what markers they're going to be getting. Everybody else needs to kind of adjust to each other. These white puddles are the cleanse puddles for your Dooms, so they'll disappear in just a bit, and then they will like leave behind a tiny white puddle. Gonna be very hard to see probably on the video, but that's what's there, and we need to go and pick that up if you're a Doom player. Your non-Doom players just need to like stay on the edge of the arena when they get knocked back. We are also getting our Eye and Thordan, so I'm going to be rewinding real quick so you can see it. So both Thordan and the Eye are going to be doing a gaze attack again, so you need to make sure you look away from both of them. So as you can see, we have the Eye here on the top right, then I'm looking around to find Thordan, who is right there, meaning that if I face my character to 3, I'm going to be fine. And then we have our PlayStation mechanic here, people adjust to each other. We get the knockback, we break our tethers, pick up your Dooms if you need to, and then we all get our individual AoEs, and then we go into meteors that we have to kill. Now, in terms of baiting all of this, your Doom players have the easiest time. Reason being, East and West Dooms just stay outside, like as far outside of the arena as possible. They will always get the red circle. The other Doom players that were Northeast and Northwest will always get purple or green, and then we have only 2 players left that are non-Dooms that are getting a blue marker. The reason why this makes it very easy is because your East and West Doom players have East and West as their positions, your Northeast, Northwest Dooms get Southeast and Southwest, and then the non-Doom players need to just adjust to that. So if you get purple or green, you need to know you need to adjust to your Doom player. If you get blue, you just need to adjust to each other, and you're going north and south. So you just have like one player that's closest to north stays there, the other player goes south. What I like to do here, if I am a non-Doom player, is I will literally go stand right here, where you can see the warrior. I'm like, I am the most northmost person that is possible right now. So if I get blue, the person tethered to me knows they need to go south, to just make it easy as possible. So I'll just show it real quick again. So because I'm Doom, I'm just gonna run to the opposite side of the arena, and I'm done. This is my safe spot. I just need to find where I need to face my character, and I am done with this mechanic. Now people adjust to each other. Again, the 2 red markers are baited on our Doom players. As you can see, our Doom players are staying outside of the arena a little bit to bait the red circle, which you'll see right here. And then me and my other Doom player get the purple and green debuff. So that means that if you get a purple or a green debuff as a non-Doom, you know where you need to go. And then you have the 2 blue markers. They're already positioned sort of north and south, so they just stay in those positions. Look away from the Eye, look away from Thordan, get knocked back. If you're a Doom player, you might need to like walk sideways a little bit to make sure that you get your cleanse puddle. And then after this, we need to kill meteors. We decide to use our caster LB2 here, just to make this DPS check easier. Phase 6 does not have a hard DPS check, so we're like, might as well use our LB here. And then we have Ancient Quagga to finish off this mechanic. Again, just like before, after this we're gonna get another double tank buster, so Heavenly Heal into Triple Cleave. This time around we'll be doing it with cooldowns. Very important here is that you do not use too many cooldowns, because phase 6 has a lot of tank busters, so you want to make sure that you save some cooldowns for that. But because the DPS check here is quite easy, we always have to hold DPS at the end of this phase, so that is why just use some cooldowns and let your healers literally chad you, like spam shields, spam heals, make sure that your tank survives. Very important here is that you do not kill Thordan. So at 2%, Thordan is going to start begging for his life and stop everything he's doing. So he's casting his Enrage here. He stops casting his Enrage once he reaches 2%. He begs for his life. You want to spare him, because otherwise you will not make it into phase 7, because Thordan needs to be alive for that. So he's going to jump away here, and then we go into phase 6. Now for phase 6, unfortunately enough, my POV is a little bit bad for this. At least for the first mechanic. For the rest it's okay. But first thing that's going to happen is both bosses come onto the arena. We have Nidhogg on the left, Rage Felger on the right. You want to make sure that both of your tanks have aggro of these bosses. Now, the first mechanic that's gonna happen is tethers plus a random tank buster. Now, to make the tank buster semi-consistent, my Dark Knight is gonna be provoking my boss here. So if we get single tank buster, it will always be on the Dark Knight. My Dark Knight has more cooldowns than I do, so it's easier for him to take the tank buster if it is guaranteed to be one. The way these tank busters work is kind of complicated because it doesn't make any sense. So, if one boss has their mouth glowing and the other one does not, it means that the one whose mouth is glowing will do a cleave, the boss who does not have their mouth glowing will do a tank buster. It can be either one of the bosses. So if Nidhogg's mouth is glowing, Rage Felger's isn't, Rage Felger would do the tank buster on their tank. If Nidhogg's mouth is not glowing, Rage Felger's is, it means Nidhogg will do a tank buster on their tank and Rage Felger will do a cleave through the middle of the arena. Now, if both bosses' mouth is glowing, it means both are doing a tank buster. So it makes no sense, but that's how it works. The double tank buster, like if both mouths are glowing, also hurts less than a single tank buster. So if it's a single tank buster, you want to make sure you give your mitigation to your co-tank if they are taking the tank buster. So because I don't have as many cooldowns to work with here, we're going to make it so that if there is a single tank buster, it is going on my Dark Knight guaranteed, and I get to save my cooldowns. Otherwise, I just use Bloodwetting on myself, and with a shield from my Scholar, that is enough to survive. So that's why the provoke is here. Second part of this is that we get tethers. Now these tethers, I'm gonna pause it right here, are proximity based. So as you can see, one of these tethers is still like pinkish purple. That means that player needs to move further away from Nidhogg to be safe. Now the safe spots for these are based on the arena. So we're gonna have one safe spot close to Nidhogg and Rage Felger, one in the middle, one at the edge of the arena. I'll show you in just a second what these safe spots look like. So in this case, Nidhogg's mouth is open, so that means cleave from Nidhogg. Rage Felger's mouth is open, but not glowing, means tank buster. So in this case, Rage Felger is going to do a tank buster on my Dark Knight. I'm going to need to dodge, and my Dark Knight is also going to need to dodge the cleave that is coming from Nidhogg. So what we want to do is we just want to move north and we'll be fine. That way we will also cleave no one that is on the south side of the arena with our tank busters, and we also won't get hit by the tether AoEs that are coming out. And like you can kind of see all the AoEs going off right here. Again, if both bosses' mouths were open and glowing, we have to stack together in the middle to share a tank buster. Now, in terms of the save spots for this mechanic, I'm gonna go back to Photoshop here. This is what the arena looks like on the bottom of the arena. If you wanna like have a look at this in game, you can go to the Nidhogg fight, Steps of Fate, I believe it is called. It's going to be the exact same arena that is being used right here. Now, these three red dots are going to be indicating our save spots. So our save spot at the bottom, right here, this one is easy because that one is going to be where like you have this like circle AoE, like where you need to stand on the inside of. This is essentially like the furthest that you can go out. If you want something else to like pre-position for this, look at these boxes, like these markers right here on the arena, these tiles have like this white lining on the inside of them. You want to stand at the bottom of those two tiles. So if you want to pre-position, if you're an anchor player, like the way we do this is we have 3 players have a fixed position, 3 other players are flexing in between the 3 save spots. So if you're an anchor player, you kind of know where to pre-position. So that's for like the bottom save spot. It's those white rectangles over here. Our middle save spot, we're going to be looking at these tiles right here. They have like a diagonal line going through them. You want to stand on the top of those tiles. So second save spot, diagonal line. Third save spot, you see all of these broken tiles right here. You want to stand at the bottom of those broken tiles. So first save spot, broken tiles. Second save spot, diagonal line. And then our final save spot is going to be like white lining on the inside square of this marker. It kind of looks like this. This is unfortunately another bad picture because like they have someone go north as well. We just have all of our players go south for this. So we have like one first, middle, and then at the bottom right there, depending on like, as you can see right here with the broken tiles, the diagonal line, and then the square marker. So that's how those save spots work. And then of course, unfortunately enough, you can't really see it that well on my POV. You see that players are going south, me and my tanks are going north because there's a cleave in the middle. Otherwise we would have just stacked in the middle. After this, I need to make sure I provoke Nidhogg back, because I don't want my tank to get destroyed. After this is done, your DPS players want to spread away from everyone else, because one of them is going to be targeted by a debuff. You'll see it right here, going onto our monk. The way this debuff works is you just need to pass it around, and as long as the debuff stays alive, it's going to be good. If your debuff does not get passed, Nidhogg is going to enrage and people will start to die. Hraesvelgr can also enrage whenever he kills anyone with damage that's coming from him. So if you get hit by damage from Hraesvelgr and you die to it, he enrages, people are going to die. When they enrage, two things will happen. One, they get a damage buff up, so to kill people, but two, they will also get a damage received down. So if they actually end up killing people right before they're enraged, when they're not doing damage anymore, you might just not make the DPS check anymore. The way how we pass this debuff is very simple. We keep it within the role that got it plus tanks. This debuff will make it so that you essentially don't do any healing anymore, so healers can never get this debuff. And to then keep it simple, we always make our tanks be second and third. So we go melee 1 into tank 1, tank 2, into melee 2, into melee 1. And then for our ranged, exactly the same. The first range that gets it passes it to tank 1, passes it to tank 2, passes it to the second ranged, the one that did not get the debuff first, and then passes it back to the one that got the debuff at the beginning. So in this case, it's gonna go monk to dark knight, warrior to ninja, back to monk at the end. And I'll tell you when the swaps are happening as well. So after the debuff is received over here, we're gonna be spreading into our light party groups, because we have Afah casted from both of the bosses, and this will target a healer. So one healer will get Nidhogg, one healer will get Hraesvelgr. What needs to happen here is one, this does AoE damage, like it's a stack marker, it does damage, but two, you also need to make sure that both bosses are within 3% of each other. So 1 and 2% is fine. As soon as you have a 3% difference in HP, one of the two groups is going to die. So you need to make sure their HP is about the same right here. And then we have the two stacks go out. After this, Nidhogg is going to jump away, and he is going to either dash through the front or through the back of the arena. Here you can see Nidhogg spawn on the back, meaning that front is going to be safe. Second thing that's going to happen is Hraesvelgr is going to cast Hallowed Wings. This is a tank buster that will also make one side of the arena unsafe. So as you can see right here, his left wing is glowing, or well, in our case, the right one, so we want to go left. So this quadrant right here on the B marker is going to be our safe quadrant. On top of this, there is a tank buster, as I mentioned, and this tank buster is baited on the two players that are either closest or furthest away from Hraesvelgr. The way how you know is based on his head position. So because his head is up, you can't even see it on the screen right now, the two furthest players will be baiting this tank buster. If his head is down, like in... I'll just let this play out in just a second. If his head is down, the two closest players are going to be baiting the tank buster. And this is what it looks like when his head is down. So when the head is down, it doesn't actually change. When the head is up, it is very clear that the head is up because you can't even see it on the screen anymore. So for this, we have our group move closest and our tanks move furthest. When I mean closest to the boss, I mean closest to the center of the hitbox of the boss. So the C marker is the closest here. The edge of the arena has nothing to do with this. So that is why the group wants to stand inwards of the hitbox a bit, so that me and my Dark Knight can stand outside of the hitbox, or on the hitbox in his case, and still be fine to get the tank buster. If it was the other way around, I would be inside here, my Dark Knight would be inside here, and then the group would be like max melee over here to make sure that they do not get hit. But it's outside, or well, it's far for our tank busters, so that is that. So after Nidhogg dashes, he comes back. We also have a swap here, so our monk is passing it to our Dark Knight on the left of the screen. And then we go into Wroth Flames. Now, Wroth Flames has a lot of things to talk about. You need to look at Hraesvelgr, you need to look at your debuffs, you need to dodge like line AoEs, you need to do the Morns correctly, and then you also need to spread debuffs. There's a lot of things going on. I'll break it down step by step. So, as Wroth Flames finishes casting, like literally at the end of the cast bar right here, we are going to be getting debuffs. So as soon as it finishes casting, people have their debuffs already. We have 4 players with a black debuff, we have 2 players with a white debuff, and we have 2 players with no debuff. Black debuff means individual AoE, so all of those players need to be spread away from each other. The white debuff means stack AoE, so those players need to be stacked together with a player that does not have a debuff. The way how we did this is we have our scholar mark players. So the black players, they just need to spread out from each other, simple enough. The white players is going to be marking one white and one non-debuff player, and those two players that are marked with the 1 and the 2 marker need to go stand closest to the edge after we dodge like all the AoEs that are going to be going on. So we have our black AoE players go right, we have our white people go left. That is how we kind of did it. We don't do like black goes to Nidhogg, white goes to Hraesvelgr or whatever. We always keep it consistent regardless of where we are dodging Wroth Flames. Second thing that we need to pay attention to is Hraesvelgr. You can see him here on the back. He will either be front, middle or back. If he is in the front, then you have a downtime pattern. If he's in the middle or in the back, you can always do uptime. I'll explain how to do uptime in just a second as well. So that's the second thing. Look where Hraesvelgr is. Third thing, look where your explosions are, because that's going to dictate where your first starting position is going to be. The starting position will always be either on the third explosion or next to the second explosion. Not like vertical, but horizontal next to the second explosion. Then Nidhogg is going to start casting Morn. This will hit 4 times and will hurt like a bitch. You want to throw literally all your mitigation that you have here. And when I say all mitigation, I mean all mitigation. The only thing that's not here from mitigation that we have is Shake It Off. And that's because I used that on Afah. But Reprisal, Feint, Addle, we have Seraph Shields, Sucker. We also have a mantra to boost those shields. We have Shield Samba, Fey Illumination. We have Expedient. We have Temperance. We have Dark Missionary. Literally everything that we have, we throw on this. This hurts incredibly hard. So mitigate this to oblivion, essentially. As you can see, we also have our 1 and 2 markers here. Scholar already marked our players, so they know that they have to move to the left and go to the edge of the arena when the dodge is done. As for our dodge, we go first on the edge, then we move to the second edge, second, third, and then we start moving in fourth, and then this is done. Then we move left and right, depending if you're white or black. We also pay attention to Nidhogg. He's going to do either Hot Tail or Hot Wing. Hot Tail is going to do a cleave through the middle of the arena. Hot Wing is going to do a cleave to the outside of the arena, and then the middle will be safe. In this case, it's Hot Tail, so we need to keep moving to dodge this, and then everybody goes to where they need to go. So black players spread out, white players, markers go to the edge, the other ones stay to the middle, and that is going to be that. After this, we also have a swap of the debuff. This is also the fastest debuff swap that needs to happen, by the way. So that is why we try to give our tanks priority to be closest to the middle. So our healers, when they are marking players for the 1 and the 2, they start from the bottom of our party list so that they take like DPS players, then healers, then tanks. And when it comes down to like the black people that are spreading out, they're also giving priority to the tank to be closest to the middle so that they can easily go back to the middle, because you probably won't have sprint here, because you might have used sprint to like spread out for your debuffs before. So I'm quickly editing this in post-production because I kind of forgot to like completely go over Wroth Flames and how it works. So here we go. So for this one, Nidhogg is always going to be cancel this. Nidhogg is always going to be in the north of the arena. As I mentioned before, Hraesvelgr can be either in the front, in the middle, or in the back. He was in the back in our case, I'll just put him there. And then we have our 3 fireball explosions. The first one is always going to come from the middle, and the way the fire explosions works is very simple. They just go like this, essentially. So that's for the middle explosion. For the 2 explosion, it's going to go like this. And the 3 explosion goes like that. Now for your starting positions, you have your 4 corners that are essentially the possible starting positions. But of course, 2 of them are going to be going away because of Hraesvelgr. Now for your uptime pattern, as long as Hraesvelgr is not here next to Nidhogg, you can do uptime. The way it works is simple. So if you have your second explosion here, that means this is going to be your starting position because you can be horizontally next to the second explosion. The way how you go is you start there, you go second one here, third one here, fourth one here, and then this gives you like the entirety of this arena to do whatever the hell you want with your debuffs. So that's how that kind of works. If, for example, our second explosion is going to be in the back here, and we have our third explosion right here, you actually do the opposite. So instead of going from here like we did before, we're actually going to be starting on our third explosion. So we start here first, second, third, and fourth. The reason being is because you go, or the way we do it at least, because we go in this like direction, the second explosion will go out by the time that we get over here. So that is why we need to be either on the third explosion, if it is there, or next to the second explosion. So if we take this setup, I guess you could say, but let's say that, for example, Felger is being a bitch and he's in the front, so we do not have an uptime pattern, then we need to go 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we can, of course, spread left, spread right, depending on if you have your dark debuff or if you have the light debuff. So that's kind of how this mechanic works. Again, if Felger is not in the front, you can literally ignore him, and then you can just do your dodge depending on where the second and third explosion are gonna be. If the third explosion is in front, you stand on the third explosion. If the second explosion is in front, you stand to the left or to the right of it, horizontally in line with that second explosion is going to be a second possible safe spot. So that's kind of how this mechanic works. After this is done, we are getting another Afah. So we need to make sure that both Felger and Nidhogg have similar HP. Again, 1 and 2% is fine, 3% is death. And then I'm just going to be using my Reprisal here because it's the only mitigation that we do have left. And also like Sucker as well as a soil that you can see as well. Then we're getting another Hallowed Wing from Felger. Head is up, tanks need to be far, group needs to be close. But this time around, Nidhogg is staying on the field and he is going to do a Hot Tail or a Hot Wing. In this case, it's Hot Wing. That means that the inside is going to be safe. However, because Felger is cleaving half of the arena, our safe spot is also cut in half. So only the right side of the safe spot is going to be safe. So our group is going closest to Felger, so underneath his hitbox. I am staying in the middle of the map because I need to be furthest away. And then my Dark Knight is going to run all the way underneath Nidhogg to take his Tank Buster over there. Because we need to be like all in this line stacked up together. The way how you can use this, oh, this is actually a perfect pause. You just basically want to stand right next to the marker if you are my Dark Knight or if you are the group that is the furthest away or the closest to Felger. And then the tank that is staying in the middle, just use this arrow, stand on the right side of the arrow in this case, and you will be in the safe spot because as you can see, this hits right through the middle. So as long as you stand slightly to the right of this, you're going to be fine. Or to the left if the other wing was glowing. After this is done, we get our Tank Busters here as well. As you can see, they're very big. We have our pass again, so I am going to be swapping to my second melee. And then we have another set of Tethers plus Tank Busters. In this case, we need to keep our debuffs. So I kind of forgot to mention this actually at the beginning, but when you get a red tether, you get a fire debuff that turns into a pyretic, that thing that if you move, you die. The ice players get an ice debuff that turns you into an ice statue when that times out. So what you do in the beginning is you have a fire tether line up with an ice tether to cancel out the debuffs. But we actually need to keep our debuffs for a next mechanic that is going to happen after this. So what we do here is we have our fire tethers go south, we have our ice tethers go north. And I'll again show you where the places are going to be. I'll quickly show a picture right here. So we have our ice tethers go north, fire tethers go south, and then tanks need to be either in the middle or they need to go to the 1 or the 3 marker. Luckily enough, I'm going to be able to show that because I do end up getting a tank buster here, meaning that one of the bosses is going to cleave. So this is what you want to do. Now, the way you position here is actually not that bad. We have one player directly south on the marker, we have one player directly on the intercardinal marker, and this player right here in the middle is going to be using the arena. Again, remember when I talked about the special looking tiles in phase 3, we're going to be using those again. So these special square tiles that you can see right here, you want to stand behind those. So not towards the middle, towards the outside of the arena on those tiles. So when it comes down to the tank busters, again, you want to have a look at your boss. If both mouths are glowing, double tank buster. If only one mouth is glowing, cleave through the arena, the other boss is going to do a tank buster. So because Nidhogg's mouth is not glowing, that means I'm going to be getting a tank buster. So my co-tank will also give me a cooldown here, because this one hurts more than the shared tank buster. Safe spot for your tanks is going to be right next to the intercardinal marker. Reason why you want to be a little bit next to it is because if you stand too close to the left, your tank buster might accidentally hit someone that is like on the south side over here on my case. So that's why you want to stand a bit to the right, but not too much to the right that you don't get hit by the cleave coming from Reishfelger in my case. So this is going to be about perfect positioning for that. And then you can see right here that I narrowly miss Reishfelger's cleave, and then also the tether that is coming out from Nidhogg, and that is going to be resolving this mechanic. So in terms of the safe spots, it's going to be a little bit clearer here. We have one person on the A marker, one person like right here next to this like special tile set, and then one player on 4. Those were the 3 safe spots. You can do the exact same thing on the other side of the arena. After this, both Nidhogg and Reishfelger will go to the north side of the arena. This is always fixed, but they will be left and right. This is going to be not fixed. So just look at which one is left, which one is right, because your debuff players need to adjust depending on which dragon that they have. If you have a fire debuff, you want to stand in front of Reishfelger. If you have an ice debuff, you want to stand in front of Nidhogg. Reasoning being, if you're turned into an icicle, Nidhogg's fire breath will cleanse you. If you are pyretic, Reishfelger's ice breath will cleanse you. So that's why you need to do that. Second thing is your tanks need to be in front of the bosses here because they're going to take bonus damage. Because your tanks don't have a debuff to get cleansed here, they will actually get a damage over time debuff after this goes out. Also, because they've pretty much used all of their cooldowns already on the tank busters, we decide to use our tank invulns here. So that's why we do that. Because we're using a tank invuln here, if you're not a warrior, you can't use it on phase 5. So if you're a warrior, you can use it on phase 5, otherwise you can't. Something to keep in mind as well. So fire debuff players in front of Reishfelger, ice debuff players in front of Nidhogg, tanks in front of that, put up some mitigation because this does quite a bit. And if you have a fire debuff, respect the hell out of this. This works on server ticks, so if you accidentally take a step forward or something on 2 seconds left, you might get unlucky with a server tick and still die to the pyretic because it decided to lock in 3 seconds early. So respect the hell out of this. There's really no reason to die to this late into the phase, because as you can see, the bosses are almost dead already and we still have like half a minute to go almost. So keep that in mind. So put up mitigation, go left and right depending on where you need to go. Tanks use their tank invulns. And then everybody moves north. The reason why we move north is because I do believe it's proximity damage of where the 2 bosses drop into the arena, and they are dropping middle and south of the arena, so that is why we go north. After we drop down, everybody moves middle except our 2 melees, because we have one last swap that needs to happen right here. So the melees stay behind on 1 to do their debuff swap, everybody else goes middle or south to start DPSing Nidhogg and Reishfelger. Only thing that's important here to keep in mind is that your tanks have a dot here. So your tanks need to make sure, or your healers need to make sure your tanks stay alive here, because this does hurt a fair bit. And then you just need to kill both bosses before they finish casting their enrage. After this is done, you want to heal up and put up some shields, because we're gonna get 2 raid-wide AoEs that put a bleed on you, but it is very important that you don't actually use normal mitigation on this. So all you want to do here is heal up and put up spammable shields, nothing else. You'll see why in just a second. So that was the first raid-wide AoE with the bleed. Now we are getting the second raid-wide AoE with a bleed right here. And then after this bleed is gone, that is when you want to pop your actual mitigation for the phase transition, because this one hurts quite a bit. You can start popping your mitigation right now, like when there's like 2 or 3 seconds left of the bleed, but your shields and stuff you want to cast after the bleed is done, because otherwise the bleed will start eating into the shield already. So mitigation has been popped, and then we go into phase number 7, which is the final phase. This one doesn't have many mechanics, but you do need to like stay on your toes for all of them. most of them will get carried by your mitigation and your healers, because this is essentially one big mitigation and healing check with one tight dodge. And your tanks also need to stay on top of things with the auto attacks, why I'll explain in just a second. So first thing that you need to know for these auto attacks is they will always hit 3 people, first and second in aggro, and the closest person to the boss. So that is why both of your tanks will want to start with their tank stance at the beginning of this phase. So we just start hitting the boss here, start getting aggro, and then we go into the first Exaflare. Now, every mechanic, or every big mechanic of this phase, there's 3 of them, will always have edge in the name. And this basically refers to like the swords of Torden. They're either going to be frozen, like right here, or they are going to be on fire, which you'll also see later into the phase. This just refers to if it's going to be an inside save or an outside save mechanic. Ice is inside save, fire is outside save. This also locks in right at the end of the cast bar, so as soon as the cast bar finishes, you can move about freely into the arena wherever you need to go. So, for this one, for Exaflare, we're getting close. Our first save spot is going to be right next to the bottom Exaflare. Exaflares are based on where the boss is facing, so the same dodge can always be done. Now, if you face the boss north or south, we also have these markings on the arena right here, and you'll be able to use the markings to actually do your Exaflare dodge. So this actually becomes a lot easier than it really should be, in my opinion. So the first dodge, our first save spot, is going to be next to the back Exaflare. Second save spot is where you can see this line come down from the sky. It's going to be like the middle of the Exaflare explosion. Third save spot is going to be where these 2 diamonds intersect, so right here where you can see my mouse moving. That's third save spot. Fourth one is going to be back where you see this line. So we stay inside for the Ice AoE, we go to the edge, we go to the back, we go back to the edge, and that's the end of the mechanic. Simple enough. After this, we have a very fast set of auto attacks, so it's important that both of your tanks immediately run away from the group. We're going left and right here, very simple. I'm always going left, my co-tank is always going right, and then we have a priority system of who is going to be taking the auto attacks. So because there are 3 sets of auto attacks, one after each of the 3 mechanics, and there are 3 roles left in our group, melees, ranged, and healers, they always have a consistent pattern. So our melees will always take after Exaflares, our ranged will always take after Morns, and our healers will always take after Gigaflares. So that's how you can keep some consistency in this mechanic as well. The player with first in aggro will get hit by a dark debuff, second in aggro will get hit by a light debuff, and the player closest to them will also take a third auto attack and get a light plus dark debuff. So that's why it's important that you rotate through your team so that they don't get stacking debuffs, because the more debuffs you have and you receive damage of the same type, you'll take bonus damage. So that's why your tanks need to be tank swapping constantly, and why you also need to go through your entire team to like stagger this debuff essentially. You want the debuff to have run out before they take a second auto attack. So auto attack 1, we have our second melee run in, auto attack 2. After this, we're going to be doing a tank swap, but the tank swap is going to happen when the next mechanic locks in. The reason why you want to wait for the next mechanic to lock in is so that the boss won't be turning around. For Morn and Gigaflare, not that important. For Exaflares, incredibly important that the boss doesn't turn during the mechanic. So that's why we always decide to wait for the mechanic to lock in before we do a tank swap. So here we're going to get Morn. His swords are on fire, so that means outside save. We have a tower on the left, a tower on the right, a tower on the back. Left and right are just shared AoE ones, so we have 3 players in each. We have again our light party stacks. The tower on the back is a tank buster that will only hit 2 players. So you do want to treat this like a normal tank buster. You don't want to use too much mitigation on the auto attacks. You want to use your actual mitigation like Rampart, Vengeance, that kind of stuff on this thing, because this hurts a lot. Also put up your normal mitigation as well, because like this is going to pulsate 4 times. And then 5 and 6 times the second and third time that we see this. If it is outside save first with the fire swords, you also want to move in, as you can see us do right here, because otherwise we'll be out of range for AoE heals, so very important. After this, we're getting 2 auto attacks again. Oh, also, this is where you want to use your limit break. You get 2 limit breaks in this phase, one LB3, one LB1, so you want to use it right here, so that you can start building that LB up again, so that you get an extra one at the end of the phase. And also there's nothing else going on here for your DPS players, so that is why they want to use their LB here. Then we're going into Gigaflare's edge, provoking the boss, tank swap. This is very simple. This is going to be 3 different Gigaflares. You either go left or you go right. You always want to be opposite of where the Gigaflare explosion is going to be. Again, it's going to be carried by your mitigation and your healers. Again, it is going to be inside safe because we have ice swords, and then we're going to start moving clockwise because that is how the Gigaflares have spawned. So we start rotating clockwise. Also try to be max melee here, to be as far enough away from the explosion as possible. And then you have your tanks keep moving to north or south, because after this we're getting another Exaflare, so that's why they want to go north or south to pre-position for that. This is also the auto attack set that takes the longest to lock in, so you have a lot of time to pre-position here. Again, wait for Exaflares to lock in before you do your tank swap. It's going to be outside safe because we have fire swords. And then we run in to where the line was, we go out to the intersection, back to the boss. Spread left and right for your auto attacks, and then the melees go in one after another. Then put up your mitigation, because we're going to have our Morns. This time it's inside safe. Tanks use their cooldowns and also tank swap once more. This time it will hit 5 times, so once more than before. Then we have our 2 auto attacks again, so ranged players. Ranged 1 is going in right now. Ranged 2. After this, we have another Gigaflare, outside safe. We are going counterclockwise this time around, because it spawned on the left of me. So, first explosion, second explosion, and then we have the third explosion. Again, tanks keep moving either north or south for your auto attacks, so that you can also pre-position for the last Exaflare. Then we have our 2 healers move in for this one, so healer 1, healers 2, and then we get ready for our final Exaflare. Again, wait for it to lock in before you do your tank swap. Inside safe first, in, go to the Exaflare explosion, out to the intersection, back to the boss. Final set of auto attacks, or actually no, that's not true, there's one more set after this. So you have your auto attacks, final Morn, that one is true. This one I'm just going to be using my tank invuln on this because I'm a warrior, so I can. You really don't need to do this, but it makes it so that we can use our cooldowns for the final set of auto attacks, so that our healers don't have to care about us essentially. So we have the last 2 auto attacks right here, and then you want to kill the boss before he kills you with Morn Afah's Edge, because that is the Enrage cast. Now for this, he is again going to be spawning 3 towers in the same exact positions. So what we do here is we have 2 healers as well as one of the tanks sec themselves. If the towers are empty, they are going to explode, deal rate-wide damage, also apply a damage down for those that do end up surviving. So you need to make sure that people are inside of these towers. After the first explosion goes out, the second one comes relatively quickly. So you need to jump into these towers pretty much immediately after they go out. And then just like put a priority system. Healers and tanks in the first one, then we have a tank with the 2 weakest DPS in the second, and then by the third one, like hope that you have killed it or you are going to die. We just keep it like the same as our normal groups. So I'm going to be in the tank tower, we have our healers in their respective towers, and then we just keep doing it like that as well, if we were to see more than one. But luckily enough, we only see one right here, and then right as we killed it, that is where the second explosion would have happened. But that is going to be doing it for the walkthrough of the Dragonsong's Reprise Ultimate. If there is anything that you have questions about, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll try and help you out. But for now, that's going to do it for me. So I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.